Ladies and gentlemen in the room, we'll start in a minute. We're having, I think, an issue with the Interactio and YouTube streams. No, I see myself on the screen, so that issue is resolved. Or at least it's still on the Interactio. Am I on the YouTube yet? Go ahead. Good, perfect. Resolved. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the United Nations Biodiversity Conference in Montreal, Canada, or COP15 as it referred to. I'm David Ainsworth, Head of Communications at the United Nations Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. Today is December the 15th. And we are moving forward with the conference. I have some guests today. We'll introduce them later on and talk about an interesting item coming up. So yesterday, which was the 14th of December, delegates resumed their negotiations at 4 p.m. after the walkout in the early hours. I want to recall that a meeting of heads of delegation was held yesterday between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m., which led to the agreement to resume discussions. So on that basis, let me give you some updates for what took place yesterday in the negotiations. The contact group on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is co-chaired by Basile Van Havre and Francis Agual, had a meeting between 4 and 7 p.m., and then again at night from 7:30 to 11:45 p.m. And the mandate of the group was to go through the entire framework, focusing on resolving bracketed text without adding new text. The group covered target 19.1 and goal D during the afternoon session, and then target 3, that's the one on protected areas, and target 16, which is on consumption, in the evening sessions. In the discussion of target 19.1, Brazil, on behalf of developing countries, made a statement on target 19.1, calling for, inter alia, closing of the finance gap. In the chapeau text of target 19.1, the aligning financial flows and the question of 700 and 500 billion, that text was moved to goal D from that target. But overall, it's just to be said that there's still a great deal of disagreement, and brackets have been added to the texts of those sections. Brazil and that group reported back with the informal group's work on target 10, and the result we have is there's a text that's streamlined with remaining brackets needing more high-level discussions. Parties also discussed target 3, the one on protected areas, removed some of the brackets, although they were unable to agree on removing brackets for most of the text. And then finally, for target 16, parties raised the importance of eliminating overconsumption versus addressing underconsumption. They created a small informal group that includes the European Union, Brazil, Argentina, the United Kingdom, and Canada, and they're going to take a look at that issue over the next day. The Friends of the Chair on item on digital sequencing information also met yesterday. That's facilitated by William Lockhart of the United Kingdom and Mfatso Kalemba of Malawi. They met from 4:05 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. And the idea was to try to finalize the drafted decision on digital sequencing information for the COP. The group looked at a revised non-paper that was posted on Tuesday evening. The co-chairs looked for a round of comments on the change in structure for the revised non-paper. Parties will be reinstating an annex that was previous version, and that will now stand as the third annex. Parties agreed that it's likely that they will not reach an agreement on the definition of digital sequencing information, and that instead their focus of this meeting should be on the solution for benefit sharing. Chairs started reviewing the non-paper that looked at operational paragraph 2. They negotiated paragraphs all the way through number 6. More brackets were added, alternative paragraphs, including the notion of encouraging public and private databases to include geographic information and other information associated with digital sequence information. The source of text disagreement was the formulation of having, or possibly having in the future, bilateral components with the solution on benefit sharing from DSI. Just remember that when you do benefit sharing arrangements, whether it's under digital sequence information, the protocol, you can have bilateral arrangements between providers and users, or you can have multilateral agreements that work in a much larger sense. The contact group on resource mobilization, the group that caused so much trouble in the early hours of yesterday morning, was held yesterday evening from 8 p.m. again until 1 a.m. this morning. So they had a Friends of the Chair that met for a bit of the time and then continued until 1:10 a.m. At the Friends of the Co-Chairs session, so that was the discussion that happened between 8 and 9:40, parties had the opportunity to engage with the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Environment Facility, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, who was here. And so they had a discussion in the context of a proposal of establishing a global biodiversity framework trust fund. So this would be a new trust fund. The conversation was productive and saw many of the concerns that were raised by parties earlier. Significant negotiations are still required, so pay attention to this space. The contact group continued after that in the evening, their first reading of the co-chair text, and they continued their first discussions up to Annex 1. The text remains significantly bracketed, but I think it's safe to say that there's a constructive engagement with the document as opposed to what happened in the previous evening. And there was a contact group on the agenda item on capacity building and knowledge management. That's going on. With that particular group, they only met for 30 minutes in the evening. In this case, the delegates, developing country parties, didn't want to continue the line-by-line negotiations, and so they've stopped that until they can find a way forward on capacity building in that case. And then finally, there was a Friends of the Chair item on indicators, and these are the indicators in support of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. They are going to meet this morning. Yes. Okay. So yeah. So that group. Sorry, I should have prepared this before, but it looks like that group is going to pause until there's some issues in terms of what's gone on in the negotiations and the framework. So today in the working group 1, it's all contact groups for now. The contact group on the financial mechanism will meet this morning at 10. A contact group on the mainstreaming item will meet at 10. A contact group on capacity building will also be meeting. And then a contact group on resource mobilization will also be meeting this afternoon. The contact group on the Global Biodiversity Framework starts this afternoon at 3 p.m. That's what we have on the go. The working group itself will continue more discussions later. For working group 2, sorry, I'm rushing through this because I've got a lot to go here. For working group 2, there was no meeting of the entire working group yesterday, only small groups. The Friends of the Chair on Biodiversity and Health met, and they completed their draft CRP. There were a few brackets, but it's expected that that conference room paper can be resolved the next time the working group meets. There was a Friends of the Chair on the Nagoya Protocol dealing with specialized instruments for access and benefit sharing. That's questions of research and health. There's a non-paper ready for consideration by that Friends of the Chair. The contact group on biodiversity and climate change met. There's more time needed to resolve the differences between the concepts of nature-based solutions versus ecosystem-based approaches. Many people talk about nature-based solutions, but under the convention process, the officially recognized term is ecosystem-based approaches, and that differentiation or that difference in definitions needs to be resolved. There are also some questions on bioenergy and its role in climate change mitigation that we have to look at as well. And finally, the contact group on synthetic biology met. They agreed on the question of the process of horizon scanning, which means looking at what's going to happen in the future, and they'll have a CRP for consideration. The high-level segment begins today. The opening plenary will be taking place at 10 a.m. this morning, starting with a cultural presentation that will take about 5 minutes, and then we'll have opening remarks. The entire session is moderated by the COP15 president, the Minister of Ecology, Environment,
et inverser la perte de nature au Canada. On a
to revert the loss of biodiversity at 1530. We'll have a minister involved in an event on the project in to revert in this oasis space on the first floor of the Palais de Congrès. The programmation for Canada Pavilion is based on the Day for Women and the Youth. The programs for today with a lot of digital posters for women in science, in technology, in engineering, and mathematics. The Vision 2022 to hear their voice on 22 different objectives. So our live is a roundtable about the Métis population around the protection of nature and connecting young people with a discussion panel with young people from across the world.
Mentioned, Minister Guilbeault will be providing opening remarks at 10 a.m. at the high-level segment, the opening. Later in the morning, Minister Guilbeault will deliver some remarks at the Nature Canada panel event, Name an Action Plan to Halt and Reverse Nature Loss in Canada. The event is happening at 10 a.m. Later during the day at 3:30, Minister Guilbeault will participate to the high-level segment event on financing the global biodiversity framework. This event will happen in the Oasis immersion space. It's on the first floor of the Palais des Congrès. And at the Canada Pavilion today, the theme is Women and Youth Day. So there's an overview of today's program with some women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There's a digital poster display. There's also Vision 2022. So 20 youth raise their voices on 22 targets. We also have Our Land is Our Life, a panel discussion on Métis leadership in protecting nature, and also Student on Ice. It's connecting and inspiring youth from pole to pole to discuss about biodiversity loss. Merci.
Okay, merci beaucoup. So it would be remiss of us here in Montreal to hold a United Nations Biodiversity Conference without giving the delegates some snow. So we can deliver on this. As many of you have heard, we have a significant winter storm that's going to arrive in Montreal and continue, I think, starting tomorrow and all day Friday into Saturday. So for that, we've invited two people to talk to us about this. First, Marie-Ève Giguère, who's a meteorologist from Environment and Climate Change Canada. She's online to talk a little bit of what's in store for us and for the delegates. And then we've invited Philippe Saborin from the City of Montreal, who's going to talk about how the Ville de Montréal is going to be working to make sure that the city keeps moving and delegates can still make their way here to the Palais des Congrès. So let's start first with Marie-Ève Giguère. So she's connected remotely, so bear with us with the technical details. So Marie-Ève, I believe the floor is yours.
All right, good morning. We can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. You're fine. Go ahead.
Thank you. So indeed, tomorrow, Friday, Montreal will receive a significant amount of snow. These snow events are common in Montreal. They occur a few times every winter. During a snow day, Montrealers' everyday activities continue. They are just slightly slower. On a snowy day like tomorrow, Montrealers and their visitors must dress in order to stay warm and dry. They will also allow extra time for their commute within the city. The snow will begin Friday and will continue throughout the day and night, tapering off only on Saturday. There will be bursts of heavier snow at times. The temperature will be near the freezing mark. However, the wind will make sure to make it feel colder, hence the importance of wearing several layers before heading outside. With the snow quickly accumulating on sidewalks, a simple walk can become difficult. It is therefore important to walk slowly, as the sidewalks may become slippery. One may also want to bring an extra pair of socks and even maybe shoes in their bag in order to enjoy a day with dry feet once they arrive at destination. Sous la neige, et même avec tout l'équipement adéquat, la neige impose la vigilance. La visibilité
During a snow day, and even with all the relevant equipment, you must be vigilant. It might be slippery as well for the people walking, as well for the people driving, and therefore you must all be vigilant and cautious. For example, by remaining away from the street, walking slowly in order not to slip, and also by really paying attention to the many vehicles driving nearby. Before entering the street or the pavement, make sure that drivers of vehicles have seen you clearly. And let's remember that the snow can sometimes rapidly accumulate, and it can be heavy and therefore lead to reduced visibility. You also need to ensure that the vehicle is able to stop, because the snow can rapidly accumulate and can form ice and increase the time it takes for a car to brake.
Will become lighter. Keeping in mind these safety tips, it will be ideal weather to build a snowman in the park.
Merci beaucoup, Marie-Ève. Marie-Ève,
Many thanks, Marie-Ève. Marie-Ève, can you tell us the quantity of snow that is expected?
We are expecting around 15 to 20 centimeters of snow. There is some uncertainty as to when exactly it will start and when the heavier bursts of snow will occur. However, we know that when it starts on Friday, it will be continuous for about 24 hours.
Thank you very much, Marie-Ève. I'm going to now turn to Philippe. So Philippe, La Ville de Montréal, can tell us a little bit about what they will be doing to make sure the delegates can make their way through the snow. Thank you, Marie-Ève. Philippe.
Alors, merci, David. Vous allez vivre la nuit prochaine un événement.
Many thanks, David. Over the night to come, you will go through an event that takes place once a year, an event that means that our city of Montreal transforms itself and becomes a northern city. This is when we go from autumn to winter. You will wake up tomorrow with white snow covering the streets, covering the sidewalks and the cycling pathways in the metropolis. I will indicate what we will do on the ground when we have this magical moment, especially for children, for tourists, for visitors, but also for all the Montreal citizens. So what will take place throughout the night is that we will see the first snowfalls, and our teams will already be working in order to pound some salt and some chemicals on the walkways, so that this will not be slippery. And when we will come to 2.5 centimeter of snow, our operators will be there in order to push the snow away from the sidewalks and pathways, in order to free the pathways, in order to make sure that it will be easier to circulate in Montreal for all. So we will need to have on the ground 1,000 employees and as many machines in order to do this first part of the work. When we will have an accumulation that will feel closer to 10, 15 centimeters, we will then kickstart the operation to load the snow, which will mean that we will have up to 3,000 employees, 2,200 vehicles, in order to gather the 15 centimeters of snow and to get rid of it. This operation, the first operation for that snow, will take place throughout the snowfall and up until 8 hours afterwards, as we need to go back on the network once again. If we have 10 to 15 centimeters, you will see this operation to load the snow with some massive machines which will gather the snow and then dispose of it. This operation to load the snow for 20 centimeter storm can take up to 4 days in order to be completed. So therefore, there is a lot of work and a lot of pleasure. You will do some snowmen, as I have stated, but also this means a lot of responsibility for a city such as Montreal. I want to underline that the public transport are the best means to move about. Please think about taxis, about buses. You have the metro nearby that you can get onto from Saint-Pierre and Saint-Antoine, from the Centre de Commerce Mondial. So therefore, you will have access to Montreal, but you will want to enjoy this beautiful snow. I'm convinced of this, but please do not drive around. This is something to be avoided. You really need to be an expert to drive around by car when, for example, we load the snow. I will show you how we basically remove the snow in the streets in Montreal. So on one side of the road, we will have an orange sign so that we will prevent people parking their cars there. And that is how we will be able to collect the snow, and we will keep the other space on the other side of the road for the car drivers in Montreal to be able to park their cars. So concretely, this is what you will go through, that experience where we will have this snowfall in Montreal. And I want to remind you that Montreal is a Nordic, playful, festive city, and also a mobile city even in the winter. So when you have a 20-centimeter snowstorm, we do not stop. You have to know that in Montreal, every year we have 190 centimeters of snow. So therefore, this is taller than I am when you have 190 centimeters throughout the year. In total, we will collect 12 million cubic meters in one winter. We will collect that snow. When it will melt, we will deal with a water plant for that water to then go back to the river in as similar state as when it fell. 100 million is our budget. And what is really interesting is that when we collected the snow and eliminated 25% of that snow is disposed of in our drains. So Sunday morning, when you will have your shower, you will contribute to the city of Montreal, making sure that the snow melts and gets eliminated. And afterwards, you will only have some pleasure in our parks, in our ice rinks, and here on the ground and on the field. I'm expecting to see many snowmen. This snow will stay. It does not happen often, but this is a snow that you can enjoy tomorrow and make some beautiful snowmen.
Out to make snowmen, to make snow sculptures that'll maybe reduce that. So invite those of you who are not from Montreal, do be careful on the streets. I've witnessed the snow removal activities is very, very fast, but watch out for those sidewalk tractors that are coming by. Thank you very much, Philippe. Thank you very much, Marie-Ève, for that. I will now take questions from the floor and people online. Let me take a look. I've got first questions over here.
Hi, Orla Dwyer from Carbon Brief. I just wondered if you had more information on the GBF Trust Fund and if there was any more details on that you mentioned.
So I don't have more details other than what I reported, but I just know that there was a discussion or an exchange with Carlos Manuel Rodriguez of the Global Environment Facility to explore the different ways that fund could be mobilized, its modalities, and what its relationship would be with other financing mechanisms. So we'll probably see more about that in the days to come. Thanks. We'll take a question from the gentleman next there, and then we'll go over to this side.
Hi, I am Diwakar Pekuril from Online Cover Nepal, and I also represent the Earth Journalism Network. So, David, you said that the number of brackets increased regarding target 19.1 as well as the content about the DSI. So, are these two things interrelated in any way? Thank you.
The entire framework is interrelated. As you may remember, the executive secretary of the convention, Elizabeth Mruma has indicated that we can't focus on any single target in the framework. We have to look at the relationship between all of these things. With regard to digital sequencing information, it has been made clear by a number of parties to the convention that any global biodiversity framework that's adopted here at COP15 is linked in some way to decisions related to digital sequencing information. So while they're standing side by side, the parties have indicated that we can't move forward on one unless we've got advancements on the others. The good news, though, is as we can see with digital sequencing information, even though there remain differences of opinion on matters such as the definition, there's a willingness to move forward and advance on that discussion. Thanks. Question over here.
Hi, thank you. I was wondering in the history of the COPs, the CBD COPs, or even if anyone's knowledgeable about it, other COPs to other conventions, how uncommon or common is a walkout impasse of the kind we saw the other day? And like in 5 years, are we going to look back at that and say, whoa, they really got through over an obstacle there? Or are we going to say, oh, there was just another tactical thing?
So maybe it's because I'm a 54-year-old father with 2 children that I've lost my memory on these things. But I have been with the convention since COP8 in Curitiba, Brazil. this is a tactic that has emerged in a number of other meetings. It's a way, one of the ways negotiators can move forward and can have sort of attention paid to it as well. I think the one thing I want to note is it was a very short walkout, in fact. So it was a walkout from 1 a.m. until just the other afternoon. So in that case, so I think negotiators engage in a number of different ways to advance negotiations, to make their points heard, to overcome blockages. And this is one. I mean, you could probably go through a number of other areas and see a number of other conventions and negotiation processes and see it. I think when we talk about the story of COP15, the UN Biodiversity Conference here in Montreal, indeed that will be noted that that particular action did sort of change the tenor, because indeed when the heads of delegations met, there was a much different approach. There was a flexibility that we didn't see before. Thanks. Question in the back row? And then we'll come to Benjamin after that.
Thanks. James Deneen from New Scientist. Can you clarify on the DSI point? Was it just the Friends of the Chair meeting that said they were unable to come to a definition of DSI? Or when you say they won't come to a definition at this meeting, do you mean at COP15 in general?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my notes here as well. So that was in the Friends of the Chair. Yeah, no, that was in the Friends of the Chair meeting that they looked at that. They've indicated that it doesn't appear that they can agree on a definition here so far. But of course, the context can change. But as of now, they don't think so. And therefore, the idea is to still move forward in other parts of it. Thanks. Benjamin over here, and then I'll look to the other side. Thanks.
Yes, Benjamin Legendre pour l'AFP. Do you have detailed on the working roadmap for ministers? Have they been entrusted with some issues 2 by 2, as it has already been done on other meetings similar?
I don't have the specifics of that roadmap, but I will note that indeed in the Bureau meeting this morning, the COP15 president, Minister Huang Rongchu, was not present at the Bureau meeting because he was engaged in ministerial discussions. So that's on the way. I don't have the specific roadmap. I expect that will start to emerge over the course of the day, and we'll see if I can report that for you as well. Thanks.
Related to that, can you give any indication of what, sorry, this is Kevin O'Sullivan from the Irish Times, can you give any indication of what the key crunch issues are being pushed into the high-level discussions?
Well, I mean, I think the key crunch issue is the Global Biodiversity Framework, if I can be so precise and specific. So I think the idea is that as the negotiations move forward over these next 2.5 days while the ministers are present, the notion will be to have the delegations brief their ministers and identify if there are opportunities for ministerial engagement to overcome these things. So you have to remember that within the convention process, we've got the negotiating teams and the delegates, and then the ministers. They're not engaged every moment of all 2 years, and so you have to bring them in and see how that's. And plus, it's a dynamic negotiating situation. So, I mean, the issues that we know are before us. We know that there are a number of areas of the text that are still bracketed. We had this discussion on resource mobilization and some of these figures of new financing and subsidies. So those will be key issues as well. And then certainly digital sequence information. So I think it's safe to say that any of the hot button issues, if I can use that vernacular, those are the ones that will need to bring the ministers in. But there's still a great deal of work, as you all know, is that we've got very few targets where it's clear and ready to go. So in these remaining 5 days of the meeting, there's a lot to do. Any other question? A second row over here, please. Thanks.
Hello, Sophie Alcalay from Collège International Marais de France. I had a question. Yesterday there was a meeting, a conference, and they put a lot of brackets, especially Brazil, who came back on a lot of decisions made in the Accord de Paris and in conferences before this one. Knowing this, is it possible to move forward and make new laws in relation with biodiversity, knowing that we are coming back on old decisions?
Right. So thank you very much for your question. So within the convention process, as we move forward, there's always a reference to what's happened before. So anything we decide now going forward has to make reference to what's been decided on the convention before on an issue, what have governments worked on, and then also references to other processes. So, for example, if we're looking at the question of climate change and biodiversity, the decisions that are taken place in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC process, it's important to note those as well. And then indeed, when you see delegations making the references to previous decisions, they're reminding what has been the basis for decisions before, reminding what has been agreed, because that helps define the space that they can move in. So it shouldn't be seen as a pessimistic sign that they're going back to decisions. It's a sign that they're taking a whole story of a particular issue area and moving forward. I mean, I think the important thing in terms of can they move forward and create this framework, it's going to be this question of resolving these areas where there's no consensus, removing the brackets, as we call it, taking brackets away from the text. That will really determine how we can move forward. I can say that the parties have demonstrated a willingness to engage. There's a lot more space for compromise now, but there are a lot more decisions to be made. Thanks very much. Any other questions? No more hands? Okay, I guess we're pretty close anyway. Imagine most of you want to get to the high-level segment. So those who get the high-level segment with the different badges, you can have access to the room. The photographers and video crews will have access to the areas with the badge area. So those of you who haven't claimed your badges when you got the email, those who are saying, listen, I didn't get an email, we do have a waiting list. We'll see if we can accommodate in the next 15 minutes. Just be gentle with Franca and don't run her over or barge the door in that case. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day. And the room is also have a number of press conferences throughout the day. I haven't had the chance to do it, but I will remind you that the DSG Amina J. Mohammed will have a press availability at 5 p.m. today. Thanks very much, everybody.
Bonne journée.